Montana Territory, 1878. A brutal winter howled across the plains like a hungry wolf, sending most folks scurrying for shelter. But Zeke Sutherland had nowhere left to run. The 25-year-old cowboy trudged through knee-deep snow, his once proud shoulders now slumped beneath the weight of responsibilities never meant to be his. In one arm, he cradled 6-month-old Lily, bundled against the cold, while 2-year-old Thomas clung to his hip, small fingers gripping Zeke's sheepskin coat with surprising strength. "Not much farther now," Zeke whispered, though the words rang hollow even to his own ears. The truth was, he had no idea where they were heading. 2 days ago, his sister Emma and her husband had succumbed to the fever that had swept through their small homestead. Their passing left Zeke, a drifting ranch hand who'd only stopped by for a brief visit, as the children's sole guardian. Zeke had always believed the frontier demanded a certain kind of solitude. A man rides alone in this country, his father had taught him, or he doesn't ride at all. It was a lesson reinforced by 5 years of driving cattle, riding fence lines, and sleeping under stars that offered no comfort, only cold, distant witness to human suffering. The frontier was no place for family, for love. Such attachments were just opportunities for the cruel West to tear your heart out. Yet here he stood, with 2 innocent lives depending on him. The town of Silver Creek lay somewhere ahead, assuming they could reach it before nightfall. But what then? What could a rootless cowboy with nothing but calloused hands and $20 to his name offer these children? Little Thomas whimpered, his face burrowing deeper into Zeke's coat. "Hush now," Zeke murmured, adjusting his grip. His arms burned with exhaustion. "We'll get there." The silhouette of Silver Creek appeared like a mirage through the swirling snow just as the last light began to fade. Relief flooded through Zeke's weary body, only to be quickly replaced by dread. The town represented shelter, yes, but also decisions he wasn't prepared to make. As they approached the first buildings, Lily began to cry, a piercing wail that seemed to echo his own internal anguish. Thomas joined in, his small body shaking with sobs. Zeke stopped, overwhelmed, his chest tightening with panic. He'd broken mustangs, survived stampedes, and once stared down a gunslinging cattle rustler, but nothing had prepared him for this. "Shoot, please," he begged, bouncing Lily awkwardly. "Just a little longer." That's when he saw her. Viola Caldwell stood in the doorway of the general store, 23 years old and striking in a practical blue dress that somehow managed to complement the rich chestnut waves cascading down her back. At the sound of the crying children, she stepped into the snow without hesitation, golden lamplight from the store silhouetting her slender figure. "You look like you could use some help," she called, her voice carrying clearly through the winter air. Zeke stiffened, pride warring with desperation. "We're managing." Viola ignored his protest, closing the distance between them with confident strides. "Of course you are," she said, reaching for Lily with practiced hands. But even the strongest riders know when to accept assistance. Before he could object, she had taken the baby from his arms, tucking the infant against her chest with such natural grace that Lily's cries immediately softened to hiccuping sobs. "I'm Viola Caldwell. My father runs the general store, and we have rooms upstairs." "Zeke Sutherland," he replied automatically. "And this is Thomas, and you're holding Lily." "Your children?" she asked, no judgment in her tone, just curiosity. "My sisters." "She and her husband." He couldn't finish the sentence. Understanding dawned in Viola's eyes. "Come inside, Mr. Sutherland. A warm meal and dry beds await you all." Something in her straightforward kindness broke through Zeke's carefully constructed walls. He found himself following her toward the store, Thomas still clinging to his hip, the boy's tear-streaked face peeking out to study Viola with cautious interest. "Miss Caldwell, I can't pay much. We'll discuss that after you've eaten," she interrupted firmly. "Some things matter more than money." As they stepped into the warmth of the general store, Zeke couldn't help but notice how the glow of the lamps caught the gold flecks in Viola's brown eyes. For the first time in years, something besides survival stirred in his heart, a dangerous feeling he immediately tried to suppress. The frontier was no place for such notions, especially not for a man carrying the burden of 2 orphaned children. The Caldwell family store served as Silver Creek's beating heart, a place where supplies, gossip, and occasional charity flowed in equal measure. Howard Caldwell, a barrel-chested man with kind eyes and a businessman's pragmatism, assessed Zeke with one look and directed him to rooms above the store. "My Viola has the right of it," he declared after hearing Zeke's abbreviated story. "You'll stay until you get your bearings. Town needs a good ranch hand anyway. Spring roundup's coming faster than we think." That night, after the children were finally asleep in a makeshift crib, Zeke sat at a small table while Viola placed a steaming bowl of stew before him. The simple act of kindness nearly undid him. "Why?" he asked, his voice rough with emotion he couldn't afford to show. Viola sat across from him, smoothing her apron. "My mother died bringing me into this world. Father raised me alone until he remarried when I was 12. I know what it means to need help." "I don't need," Zeke began automatically. "Everyone needs something, Mr. Sutherland," she interrupted. "Even cowboys who carry babies through blizzards." Their eyes met across the table, and for an instant, Zeke glimpsed a strength in her that matched the harshness of the frontier itself. Not hardness, but resilience, like the prairie grasses that bent beneath winter snow only to rise again in spring. "I'll find work," he said finally. "Pay you back. Father already mentioned the Rocking L Ranch is hiring. Owner's an old friend." Zeke nodded gratefully, then hesitated. "And the children?" "While I work." A small smile touched Viola's lips. "I run a small school for the town's children 3 days a week. Little Thomas could join us, and Lily can stay with Mrs. Peterson. She watches several of the miners' babies." "I can't ask." "You didn't ask. I offered." Viola rose from the table with quiet dignity. "That's how we survive out here, Mr. Sutherland. Not alone, but together." As she turned to leave, Zeke caught her hand impulsively. The touch sent an unexpected current through him, and he released her quickly. "Thank you," he managed. Something flickered in Viola's eyes. Surprise, perhaps, or something deeper. She nodded once before disappearing down the hallway, leaving Zeke to wonder if he'd just been thrown a lifeline or if he was about to drown in deeper waters than he'd ever navigated before. Spring came to Montana territory like a shy lover, tentative touches of warmth followed by retreats into winter's cold embrace. By April, Zeke had established a routine that somehow kept the fragile world he'd inherited from collapsing. He worked dawn to dusk at the Rocking L, proving himself invaluable during the calving season. His natural way with horses and unflinching work ethic earned him steady pay and the respect of the ranch owner. Each evening, he collected the children, Thomas from Viola's schoolroom and Lily from Mrs. Peterson's care, and returned to the rooms above the general store that had become their temporary home. Temporary. The word haunted him like a ghost. Nothing in his life had ever been permanent, and he saw no reason why this arrangement should be different. Eventually, he would need to move on, find a place of his own. Or perhaps, the thought he couldn't bring himself to complete involved the orphanage in Helena. Children needed stability, a proper family. What could a solitary cowboy offer them except uncertainty? Yet each time Thomas wrapped small arms around Zeke's neck or Lily's face lit up with recognition when he entered a room, the idea of parting from them became more unbearable. "You're good with them," Viola commented one evening as she helped Zeke bathe the children. She knelt beside the tin tub, sleeves rolled up and hair escaping its pins as she supported Lily while Zeke soaked Thomas's dark curls. "I'm muddling through," he replied, though secretly, her words warmed him. "No, you truly are." Viola lifted Lily from the water, wrapping her in a towel. "You speak to them like people, not possessions or burdens." Many men wouldn't. Zeke concentrated on rinsing soap from Thomas's hair, uncomfortable with her praise. "They deserve better than what I can give them." Viola's hand stilled. "What exactly do you think they need that you can't provide?" "Stability. A proper home." He swallowed hard. "A mother." The word hung between them, charged with implications neither was ready to acknowledge. "Children need love more than they need perfection," Viola said finally, her voice soft but certain. "You love them. Anyone can see that." Did he? Zeke hadn't allowed himself to name the feeling that squeezed his heart when Thomas fell asleep against his shoulder or when Lily grasped his finger with her tiny hand. Love meant vulnerability, and vulnerability was dangerous in a land where death rode the wind and fortune changed like weather. Before he could respond, a commotion erupted downstairs, voices raised in alarm. Viola handed Lily to Zeke and hurried to investigate, returning moments later with tension etched across her face. Riders just brought word. The spring thaw has brought flooding along the river. Several homesteads are underwater, and the railroad bridge is threatened. Zeke immediately stood, securing towels around both children. The ranch hands will be called to help. Yes, they're gathering men now. Viola hesitated. I can watch the children if, thank you. The words came automatically now, the walls between them thinning with each passing day. I'll go as soon as they're dressed. As Zeke prepared to leave, Thomas clung to his leg. You coming back? The simple question struck Zeke like a physical blow. How many people had walked away from this child's short life already? He knelt down, meeting the boy's eyes. I promise I'll come back. You stay with Miss Viola and help with Lily. Can you do that? Thomas nodded solemnly, and Zeke ruffled his hair before turning to Viola. Something in her expression, pride mingled with worry, made his chest tighten. Be careful, she said quietly. They need you. What she didn't say, but what hung in the air between them, was that perhaps she needed him too. For 3 days, Zeke worked alongside other men from Silver Creek and surrounding ranches to sandbag the river's edge and evacuate threatened homesteads. The work was grueling and dangerous, the newly melted water running fast and deadly cold. On the second day, he helped pull 2 children from a collapsed farmhouse just moments before the structure was swept downstream. As he carried those children to safety, their faces reminded him of Thomas and Lily waiting in town. The realization struck him with stunning clarity. He wanted to be the one they could count on, always. Not just until something better came along, or until he convinced himself they'd be better off without him. When he finally returned to Silver Creek, mud-caked and exhausted, he found Viola sitting in a rocking chair by the fire, Lily asleep in her arms while Thomas played quietly at her feet. The scene, so domestic, so achingly beautiful, stopped him in the doorway. For a fleeting moment, he allowed himself to imagine this was truly his family, that he belonged in this picture of home and hearth. The longing that swept through him was almost painful in its intensity. You're back, Viola said softly, her smile illuminating the dim room more effectively than the firelight. Thomas looked up, his face breaking into joy as he launched himself at Zeke's legs. You came back. I promised, didn't I? Zeke scooped the boy up, ignoring his aching muscles and the mud transferring to Thomas's clean clothes. As he held the child close, Zeke caught Viola watching them, something unreadable in her expression. When their eyes met, a current passed between them that had nothing to do with the children and everything to do with possibilities neither had dared voice. That night, after the children slept, Zeke found Viola alone in the kitchen, preparing dough for the next morning's bread. I've been thinking, he began awkwardly, about finding a more permanent arrangement. Viola's hands stilled in the dough. Oh, the foreman mentioned a small cabin on the northern edge of the ranch property. Previous hand built it, but moved on last year. Said I could take it if I wanted to stay on permanent like. That sounds promising. Her voice was carefully neutral. It needs work. Another room for the children, proper furniture. Zeke rubbed the back of his neck. But it would be ours. Somewhere stable. Viola's eyes softened. You've decided to keep them, then? For good. Is that foolish? A single man raising 2 little ones. Foolish. Viola shook her head slowly. I think it's the bravest thing I've ever heard. She returned to kneading the dough, but not before Zeke caught the shimmer of tears in her eyes. Something expanded in his chest. Hope, perhaps, or something even more dangerous. I thought. He cleared his throat. I thought maybe you might visit sometimes. The children are fond of you. Just the children? The question was barely audible, her eyes fixed on her task. Zeke stepped closer, heart hammering. No, not just the children. Before he could say more, a pounding on the store's front door interrupted them. Howard Caldwell's voice called up the stairs, urgent with alarm. Zeke, you up there? We need you. The peaceful moment shattered as Zeke hurried downstairs to find several men gathered in the store. What's happened? He demanded. Frank Miller, the town's blacksmith, stepped forward. Lyle Jenkins' boy rode in half dead from exhaustion. Says a gang hit their place. 3 men, heavily armed. They've taken the farm and are holding his folks hostage. Jenkins. Zeke frowned. His place is just south of where we were sandbagging. Sheriff Barrett nodded grimly. These bastards are opportunists, swooping in while we're all distracted with the flooding. We're gathering every man who can shoot straight. Zeke's mind raced. The Jenkins family had a daughter about Thomas's age. He'd seen her when delivering supplies during the flood efforts. "I'll come," he said firmly. As the men organized, Viola appeared at his side, pressing a package of food into his hands. "You'll need this." Her fingers lingered on his, and in the briefest of moments, everything unspoken between them seemed to crystallize. Without thinking, Zeke bent and pressed his lips to hers, a swift, impulsive gesture that startled them both. "I'll come back," he promised again, echoing his words to Thomas. "You'd better." Her voice held both fear and determination. "We have unfinished business." The confrontation with the outlaws stretched from hours into a day as the men of Silver Creek implemented a careful strategy to free the Jenkins family without bloodshed. Positioned behind a ridge overlooking the farm, Zeke found himself alongside Sheriff Barrett, studying the movements of the armed men through a spyglass. "They're getting nervous," Barrett observed, "splitting up to check different parts of the property." Zeke nodded. "If we can isolate them, we might avoid a direct firefight." As the rescue plan unfolded, Zeke found himself tasked with approaching from the creek bed to reach the back of the house. The dangerous assignment suited him. He moved silently, with the instincts honed by years on the frontier. When gunfire erupted from the front of the property, Zeke seized his opportunity, slipping into the farmhouse through an unguarded window. Inside, he found Mrs. Jenkins and her children huddled in a corner, a third outlaw standing over them with a revolver. What happened next occurred in a blur of motion and instinct. The outlaw turned, gun raising toward Zeke. A shot rang out. Pain exploded across Zeke's left side as he fired his own weapon. The outlaw crumpled, and Zeke staggered against the wall, pressing his hand against the burning wetness spreading across his ribs. "Get down," he ordered the family, unsure if more outlaws remained inside. Through the window, he could see the sheriff's men overtaking the other criminals. Victory seemed assured, until the wounded outlaw stirred, raising his gun one final time, not at Zeke, but toward the cowering children. Without hesitation, Zeke threw himself forward, covering the family with his body as another shot cracked through the room. Something hit him hard in the shoulder, spinning him around before darkness claimed him. Zeke awoke to soft lamplight and the scent of lavender. For a disoriented moment, he thought he might have died, until pain lanced through his side, confirming his very mortal state. "Stay still." Viola's voice came from beside him, her hand cool against his forehead. "The doctor says you were fortunate. The first bullet grazed your ribs. The second lodged in your shoulder but missed anything vital." Struggling to focus, Zeke found her face hovering above his, beautiful despite reddened eyes and worry lines etched around her mouth. "The Jenkins family?" he rasped. "Safe, thanks to you." Viola's voice caught, "though you very nearly killed yourself saving them." Memory flooded back. The gunfire, the children's terrified faces. The children? Thomas and Lily. Downstairs with father. "Thomas has been asking for you every hour." Relief swept through Zeke, followed quickly by realization. He was lying in a bed, Viola's bed, he guessed from the feminine touches around the room. "How long?" he managed. 3 days. Viola's composure finally cracked as tears spilled down her cheeks. 3 days of not knowing if you would open your eyes again. She turned away, shoulders shaking with silent sobs. Despite the searing pain, Zeke reached for her hand. "Viola." She faced him again, grief and something else warring in her expression. "I'm sorry I frightened you," he said softly. "You promised to come back." Her voice was barely audible. "I almost lost. The children almost lost you." The slip revealed everything. Zeke tightened his grip on her hand, ignoring the protest from his injured shoulder. "I meant to keep that promise." He took a shaky breath. "Still do." Viola's eyes searched his face. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that near death has a way of clearing a man's thinking." With tremendous effort, Zeke pushed himself straighter against the pillows. "I've spent years believing I needed to face this frontier alone, that attachments were weaknesses. But I was wrong, Viola." A tear slid down her cheek. "Were you? Those children gave me purpose when I was lost. And you?" He faltered, then continued with newfound courage. "You showed me that strength comes from connection, not isolation." "Zeke, let me finish." He managed a pained smile. "I might not get another chance to be this brave." Something like hope flared in Viola's eyes, and she nodded for him to continue. I want that cabin by the creek, with another room built on for the children. I want to raise Thomas and Lily as my own. But more than anything, he gathered his courage. I want you there with us, as my wife, if you'll have me. The silence that followed stretched like an eternity, broken only when the door creaked open and Thomas peeked in, his small face lighting with joy at seeing Zeke awake. "Uncle Zeke," he cried, rushing to the bedside. Viola caught him before he could throw himself onto Zeke's injured body. "Gentle, Thomas. Uncle Zeke is still healing." The boy nodded solemnly, then reached out to touch Zeke's hand with careful fingers. "You came back. I promised, didn't I?" Zeke managed, emotion thickening his voice. Howard appeared in the doorway, holding Lily, who squirmed at the sight of Zeke, reaching pudgy arms toward him. "Look who's finally decided to rejoin the land of the living," Howard said gruffly, though his eyes shone with genuine relief. Viola took Lily from her father, bringing the baby close enough that Zeke could touch her cheek. Standing there, with one child in her arms and the other pressed against her side, Viola looked at Zeke with an expression that stole what little breath he had left. "You never gave me a chance to answer your question," she said softly. Zeke's heart thundered in his chest, pain momentarily forgotten. "I'm listening now." "Yes." Her smile bloomed like the first wildflower after winter. "Yes to all of it." By summer's end, the cabin by the creek had transformed. Zeke, with help from other ranch hands, had added a second bedroom and a covered porch. Inside, touches of Viola's influence were evident everywhere. Curtains at the windows, quilts on the beds, wildflowers in mason jars. Their wedding had been a simple affair in Silver Creek's small church, Thomas proudly carrying the rings while Howard held Lily. The town turned out in force, not just to celebrate the union, but to honor the man who had helped save the Jenkins family. Now, on a golden September evening, Zeke sat on the porch steps, watching the sunset paint the Montana sky in impossible colors. Inside, he could hear Viola singing softly to Lily, the melody drifting through the open window like a promise. Thomas played nearby, constructing an elaborate fortress from sticks and stones. Occasionally he would look up, making sure Zeke was still watching, still present. The sound of hoofbeats announced a rider approaching. Zeke recognized the sheriff's bay gelding and rose to greet him, mindful of his still healing shoulder. "Evening, Barrett," he called. "What brings you out this way?" The sheriff dismounted, removing his hat. "Just delivering mail from town. Letter came for you." Zeke accepted the envelope, recognizing the return address with a jolt of surprise. His brother Daniel, whom he hadn't heard from in nearly 2 years. "Everything all right?" Barrett asked, noting Zeke's expression. "Yes, just unexpected correspondence." Zeke tucked the letter into his pocket. "Can I offer you coffee before you head back?" Barrett declined, citing other deliveries, and soon was nothing but a dust cloud on the horizon. Zeke remained on the porch, contemplating the letter in his pocket. Once, news from his wandering brother would have stirred his own restlessness, reminded him of the open trail and unburdened freedom. Now, it simply felt like news from another life. The cabin door opened, and Viola emerged with Lily on her hip. The baby, now nearly a year old, reached for Zeke immediately. "She refuses to sleep unless you say goodnight," Viola explained, passing the child to Zeke's good arm. As he balanced Lily, Thomas abandoned his fortress to scramble up beside them, claiming his own space against Zeke's side. The weight of both children, one on his hip, one pressing against him, filled Zeke with a contentment he'd never imagined possible in his drifting days. "Barrett brought a letter," he told Viola. "From Daniel. Your brother? After all this time?" Viola settled beside them on the step, her shoulder touching his. "What does he say?" "Haven't opened it yet." Zeke bounced Lily gently. "Thought it might wait until after the children are asleep." Viola studied his face. "You're not curious?" "I am," he admitted, "but not urgently. Whatever news he brings, good or bad, it doesn't change this." He gestured to the cabin, the children, and finally to her. "It doesn't change us." Understanding dawned in Viola's eyes. She knew his history, knew the part of him that had once believed frontier life demanded solitude, that had feared attachments would only lead to loss. "You really have changed," she said softly, brushing her fingers against his cheek. Zeke captured her hand, pressing a kiss to her palm. "For the better, I hope." Thomas leaned more heavily against him, eyes growing heavy with approaching sleep. Lily was already dozing against his chest, her small breaths warm and steady. As twilight deepened around them, Zeke felt the weight of his past beliefs falling away completely. The frontier wasn't a place that demanded isolation. It was a land that required connection to survive. Every homesteader, every ranch hand, every townsperson understood that truth. Somehow, he had lost sight of it along the way. I used to think being alone made me stronger, he said quietly. That needing others was weakness. Viola leaned her head against his shoulder, careful of his healing wound. And now I know better. Zeke looked down at the children, his children now, in every way that mattered, and then at the woman who had shown him a different kind of courage. Viola's hand found his as the first stars appeared above the Montana plains. You were never meant to be alone, Zeke Sutherland, she whispered. None of us were. In that moment, with one baby on his hip and another dozing in his arms, Zeke finally understood the lesson the frontier had been teaching all along. It wasn't about surviving in isolation, but about building something meaningful amidst the harshness, creating family where none existed before. You're right, he murmured, pressing a kiss to her temple. I'm not alone. Not anymore. The cabin glowed with lamplight behind them, a beacon of warmth against the gathering dusk, proof that even in the wild heart of the frontier, love could take root and flourish, stronger than any storm that might come.